My name is Jessica Martinez and I'm 32 years old. Last Tuesday I discovered my sister inherited everything from our grandmother's estate, a Tesla Model S, a luxury downtown condo and $10 million. I wasn't even invited to the will reading. For 20 years I believed I was Grandma Rosa's favorite granddaughter. I spent every weekend at her house, helped with groceries, listened to her stories. Meanwhile, my sister Vanessa barely visited once a month. The betrayal cut deep, but what I uncovered next about our family's dark secrets changed everything forever. Before we dive into this twisted tale of family deception and ultimate revenge, I'm curious, where are you watching from today? If you're ready for a story that'll make you question everything you think you know about family, loyalty, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this journey gets wild. Trust me, you'll want to see how karma finally catches up to the people who think they can manipulate blood bonds for money. Growing up in San Antonio, Texas, our family dynamic seemed picture perfect from the outside. Mom worked as a nurse, Dad owned a small auto repair shop, and Vanessa and I were the typical American sisters with a 2-year age gap. But Grandma Rosa was our anchor, the matriarch who held everyone together with her incredible tamales and endless stories about surviving the Depression. Every Saturday morning, like clockwork, I'd bike over to Grandma's modest house on Flores Street. The routine never changed. We'd sit on her front porch sipping café con leche, while she taught me traditional Mexican recipes that had been passed down for generations. She'd tell me stories about her late husband, my grandfather Miguel, who built their house with his own hands in 1952. Those moments felt sacred, just the two of us bonding over family history. Vanessa, my older sister, lived a completely different life. Even as teenagers, she was always chasing the next party, the next boyfriend, the next adventure. While I spent weekends helping Grandma Rosa with yard work and grocery shopping, Vanessa would sleep until noon, then disappear with her friends until late at night. Our parents constantly fought about her behavior, but somehow Vanessa always charmed her way out of serious consequences. Mija, Grandma Rosa would tell me during our Saturday visits, family is everything. Money comes and goes, but the love between blood relatives lasts forever. She'd always emphasize how proud she was of my dedication to family values, my commitment to education, and my respect for our Mexican heritage. I genuinely believed I was her favorite, the granddaughter who would carry on our family traditions. The signs of Grandma's declining health started appearing last spring. At 87, she began forgetting small details and occasionally seemed confused during our conversations. Dad suggested we start visiting more frequently, so I increased my trips to 3 times per week. I'd bring her medications, help organize her bills, and make sure she was eating properly. Vanessa would show up maybe once every 2 weeks, usually asking for money or borrowing Grandma's car. During one particularly concerning visit in July, Grandma Rosa seemed unusually agitated. She kept mentioning important papers and making things right, but never elaborated on what she meant. When I pressed for details, she'd change the subject or claim she couldn't remember what she was talking about. I assumed it was just the normal anxiety that comes with aging, so I didn't push the conversation further. The phone call came on a Wednesday morning in early October. Dad's voice was shaking when he told me Grandma Rosa had passed away peacefully in her sleep. The funeral arrangements became a blur of grief and logistics. Surprisingly, Vanessa stepped up during this period, handling most of the planning with an efficiency I'd never seen from her before. She contacted the funeral home, organized the service, and even arranged for catering afterward. "Don't worry about the details, Jess," she kept saying. "I've got everything under control. You just focus on grieving." At the time, I was grateful for her unexpected helpfulness. Grief had left me emotionally exhausted, and I appreciated having someone else manage the practical aspects of saying goodbye to our beloved grandmother. The will reading was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 10 a.m. I assumed the entire family would attend, Mom, Dad, Vanessa, and myself. We'd probably inherit some sentimental items, maybe a small amount of money that Grandma had managed to save over the years. Her house wasn't worth much in our neighborhood, but I hoped to get some of her jewelry or perhaps her collection of vintage cookbooks. Tuesday morning arrived and I dressed in my most respectful outfit. A simple black dress and pearl earrings that Grandma Rosa had given me for my college graduation. I drove to the law office expecting to meet my family in the waiting room, but when I arrived at Morrison & Associates, the receptionist looked confused when I mentioned the Martinez estate reading. "I'm sorry, but that meeting concluded about an hour ago," she said, checking her computer screen. "Are you sure you have the right time?" My heart started racing. "No, that's impossible. The appointment was scheduled for 10 a.m. I'm Jessica Martinez, Rosa Martinez's granddaughter." The receptionist's expression shifted to uncomfortable sympathy. "Let me get Mr. Morrison. There seems to be some confusion." David Morrison, a distinguished man in his 60s, emerged from his office with a genuinely puzzled look. "Miss Martinez, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. The will reading was moved to 9 a.m. this morning at your sister's request. She mentioned that you wouldn't be able to attend due to a work conflict." The room started spinning. Work conflict? I never said anything about a work conflict. I specifically requested time off for this appointment. Mr. Morrison's professional demeanor couldn't hide his growing discomfort. "Your sister Vanessa was very clear that you couldn't make it. She said the family had already discussed alternative arrangements with you." That's when the horrible truth started crystallizing. Vanessa had deliberately excluded me from our grandmother's will reading. But why? What could possibly be important enough to justify such a betrayal? The lawyer agreed to provide me with a summary of the will's contents, and what I learned in that sterile conference room shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. Mr. Morrison's hands trembled slightly as he pulled out a thick manila folder containing Grandma Rosa's last will and testament. The document was dated just 3 months before her death, which immediately struck me as suspicious since she'd never mentioned updating her will during any of our frequent visits. According to Mrs. Martinez's final wishes, the lawyer began carefully, "The entire estate has been bequeathed to Vanessa Elena Martinez, your sister." He paused, clearly uncomfortable with my shocked expression. "This includes the family home on Flores Street, all personal belongings, financial assets totaling approximately $10 million, and a 2023 Tesla Model S that was purchased 6 months ago. $10 million. The number echoed in my head like a broken record. Our humble grandmother, who clipped coupons religiously and bought generic groceries, had somehow accumulated $10 million. The woman who wore the same 3 dresses to church every Sunday and darned her own socks owned a fortune that most people could never imagine. "That's impossible," I whispered, gripping the edge of the conference table. Grandma Rosa lived modestly. She was always worried about having enough money for groceries and utilities. Where did $10 million come from? Mr. Morrison shuffled through additional paperwork. According to the estate documentation, Mrs. Martinez had been the beneficiary of several successful real estate investments dating back to the 1972. She also inherited a substantial sum from a distant relative in Mexico approximately 15 years ago. The Tesla was purchased as a gift for Miss Vanessa Martinez shortly before Mrs. Martinez's passing. My mind raced back to all those Saturday mornings when Grandma Rosa would stress about her finances. She'd show me coupon books and worry about the rising cost of her medications. Either she'd been lying to me for years, or something much more sinister was happening behind the scenes. "Was I mentioned in the will at all?" I asked, dreading the answer. The lawyer's expression grew even more uncomfortable. "There is a brief mention. You've been left Mrs. Martinez's collection of cookbooks and her rosary beads. There's also a personal note addressed to you." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandma Rosa's familiar handwriting. With shaking fingers I opened it and read the devastating message inside me. "Querida Jessica, I hope someday you can forgive an old woman's difficult decisions. Vanessa needs this inheritance more than you do. She has made mistakes, but family must protect family. The cookbooks contain all our family recipes. Please remember me when you make tamales. Con amor, Abuela Rosa." The note felt like a knife through my heart. After decades of devotion, of sacrificing my weekends and evenings to care for her, I'd been reduced to a footnote in her final wishes. Meanwhile, Vanessa, who barely visited, never helped with errands, and constantly borrowed money, had inherited everything. "Mr. Morrison, I need to understand something," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "When was this will created, and who witnessed the signing?" He consulted his files again. The will was executed on July 15th of this year. It was witnessed by Vanessa Martinez and a woman named Carmen Delgado. Miss Delgado identified herself as Mrs. Martinez's neighbor and close friend, July 15th. I remembered that date clearly because it was the day after one of my regular visits when Grandma Rosa had seemed particularly confused and agitated. She'd kept talking about important papers and mentioned that Vanessa had been visiting more frequently. At the time, I'd been pleased that my sister was finally taking more interest in our grandmother's well-being. Carmen Delgado was indeed Grandma's neighbor, but calling her a close friend was a stretch. Carmen was a woman in her 50s who occasionally borrowed garden tools and exchanged pleasantries over the fence. She certainly wasn't someone I'd expect to witness such an important legal document. "Is there any way to contest this will?" I asked.
Mr.
Morrison's expression suggested he'd been expecting this question. Contesting a will requires substantial evidence of fraud, coercion, or mental incapacity at the time of signing. Mrs. Martinez underwent a cognitive assessment as part of the will preparation process, and she was deemed mentally competent by Dr. Patricia Hernandez. Another name I didn't recognize. In all my years of taking Grandma Rosa to medical appointments, we'd always seen Dr. Samuel Rodriguez, her longtime family physician. Who was Dr. Patricia Hernandez? And why had Grandma suddenly switched doctors during her final months? As I drove home from the lawyer's office, my phone started buzzing with text messages from Vanessa. Each message made my blood pressure rise higher. "Jess, I'm so sorry you missed the will reading. I tried to call but couldn't reach you. I know this must be confusing, but Grandma Rosa made her wishes very clear. Don't worry about the funeral expenses. I'll take care of everything since I inherited the estate. We should talk soon. There are some things you need to understand about Grandma's situation." The audacity of her messages was breathtaking. She was acting like some unfortunate miscommunication had occurred, rather than acknowledging that she'd deliberately excluded me from the most important family meeting of our lives. The fake concern in her texts felt like salt in an open wound. That evening I sat in my small apartment kitchen staring at Grandma Rosa's cookbook collection. These worn, stained books represented decades of family traditions and cherished memories. But now they felt like consolation prizes, crumbs thrown to the granddaughter who'd actually cared enough to preserve our family's legacy. As I flipped through the pages of handwritten recipes, something didn't feel right. Several pages had been torn out, leaving only ragged edges behind. Why would someone remove recipes from cookbooks that were supposedly being preserved for sentimental reasons, unless they contained something more valuable than ingredients and cooking instructions? The next morning I called in sick to work and drove straight to Grandma Rosa's house on Flores Street. Vanessa's Tesla was parked in the driveway, the same luxury car that our supposedly cash-strapped grandmother had somehow purchased as a gift. The sight of it sitting there gleaming in the Texas sun felt like a mockery of everything I'd believed about our family's financial situation. I knocked on the front door and Vanessa answered, wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse I'd never seen before. Her entire appearance seemed different, more polished, more confident, like someone who'd recently come into serious money. "Jess, I'm so glad you came by," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Come in, we really need to talk." The house felt strange and empty without Grandma Rosa's presence. Most of her furniture remained, but personal items had been packed into boxes scattered throughout the living room. Vanessa had clearly been busy organizing the estate, moving with an efficiency that suggested she'd been planning for this moment. "I want to explain about yesterday." Vanessa began settling into Grandma's favorite armchair. "I know you're hurt about missing the will reading, but honestly it was better this way. The lawyer said these things can get emotional, and I didn't want you to be upset." Her condescending tone made my jaw clench. Upset about what exactly? About discovering that our grandmother was secretly wealthy, about being excluded from her final wishes after decades of caring for her, or about finding out that my own sister manipulated an elderly woman for money? Vanessa's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "You don't understand the full situation, Jessica. Grandma Rosa wasn't as sharp as you thought during her final months. She needed guidance with important decisions." "Guidance? Is that what you call convincing an elderly woman to change her will 3 months before she died? She asked me to help her, Vanessa insisted. Grandma was worried about her finances, about making sure her legacy was protected. I spent weeks helping her organize her affairs, something you were apparently too busy to notice. That statement hit like a physical blow. Too busy? I was there 3 times a week. I helped with her medications, her grocery shopping, her doctor appointments. Where were you during all of that? I was handling the important stuff, Vanessa replied smugly. The financial planning, the legal arrangements, the real estate investments. While you were playing house with an old woman, I was actually helping secure her future. The casual cruelty of her words revealed the depth of her manipulation. She'd turned my genuine care and devotion into something small and meaningless, while positioning her own opportunistic behavior as necessary family management. Tell me about Dr. Patricia Hernandez, I demanded. Grandma Rosa had been seeing Dr. Rodriguez for 20 years. Why did she suddenly switch doctors right before changing her will? Vanessa's hesitation was barely perceptible, but I caught it. Dr. Rodriguez was getting too old. Grandma wanted someone younger, more up-to-date on elder care issues. And Carmen Delgado. Since when was she considered a close family friend? Carmen has been helping Grandma with things around the house for months, Vanessa said, but her voice carried a defensive edge. You were so focused on your little cooking sessions that you missed what was really going on. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, needing distance from her lies. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Hanging on the refrigerator was a calendar with appointments marked in Vanessa's handwriting, not Grandma Rosa's. The entries went back 6 months, and included meetings with lawyers, financial advisors, and doctors I'd never heard of. Vanessa, how long have you been planning this? She followed me into the kitchen and her facade finally crumbled completely. Planning what? Taking care of family business, making sure Grandma's assets were protected instead of wasted on someone who doesn't understand money. Someone like me, you mean? Exactly like you, she snapped. You're 32 years old, Jessica. You work as an administrative assistant, live in a tiny apartment, and your biggest ambition is preserving family recipes. Grandma Rosa knew I could do something meaningful with her legacy. The mask was completely off now. This wasn't about protecting our grandmother or honoring her wishes. This was about greed, pure and simple. Vanessa had systematically manipulated an elderly woman, isolated her from family members who might ask uncomfortable questions, and orchestrated an elaborate scheme to steal her inheritance. But as I stood there absorbing the full scope of her betrayal, something else became clear. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was determined. Vanessa had made a critical mistake by underestimating me. She saw someone weak and naive, but what she'd actually done was awaken something fierce and unrelenting. I'm going to contest the will, I said quietly. Vanessa laughed, but there was nervousness underneath the sound. With what money? Do you have any idea how expensive legal challenges are? Besides, you have no evidence of anything improper. She was right about the money. I couldn't afford a prolonged legal battle against someone who'd just inherited $10 million. But she was wrong about the evidence. Those torn pages in the cookbooks, the mysterious doctor and witness, the calendar with appointments in her handwriting. These were threads that could be pulled. You know what's interesting about you, Vanessa, I said, moving toward the front door. You've always been so focused on the big picture that you miss the details. You think you've covered all your bases, but you've left a trail of evidence everywhere. What evidence? She demanded, following me outside. I paused next to her Tesla, running my hand along its pristine surface. For instance, when exactly did Grandma Rosa test drive this car? Because according to the DMV records, I can easily access it, was registered to you 2 weeks before she supposedly bought it as a gift. The color drained from Vanessa's face. That's just paperwork. She asked me to handle the registration. Right. Just like she asked you to handle the will, the medical evaluations, and the witness signatures. I smiled for the first time since this nightmare began. You've made so many mistakes, sister. And I'm going to find every single one. As I drove away from Flores Street, I could see Vanessa standing in the driveway, her confident demeanor replaced by something that looked a lot like panic. She'd spent months planning her perfect crime, but she'd forgotten one crucial detail: the person she'd betrayed wasn't going to disappear quietly into the background. The war for our grandmother's legacy was just beginning, and I intended to win. The next 3 weeks became a masterclass in detective work. I took vacation time from my administrative job and dedicated myself entirely to unraveling Vanessa's web of deception. What I discovered was far more elaborate and sinister than I'd initially imagined. My first breakthrough came through social media. While scrolling through Vanessa's Instagram account, I noticed she'd been posting photos from expensive restaurants and shopping trips dating back 8 months, long before Grandma Rosa's death. The timestamps on these posts coincided perfectly with her supposed increase in visits to our grandmother's house. She hadn't been providing elder care, she'd been funding a luxury lifestyle. I screenshot every post noting the dates and locations. Vanessa had been remarkably careless about documenting her spending spree, apparently confident that no one would connect the dots between her sudden wealth and Grandma Rosa's mysterious financial decisions. Next, I contacted Dr. Samuel Rodriguez, Grandma's longtime physician. What he told me during our phone conversation made my stomach turn. "Your grandmother called my office in July, very confused and upset," he explained. "She said someone had told her she needed a specialist for memory issues, but she couldn't remember who had suggested it. When I offered to refer her to a neurologist I trust, she said her granddaughter had already arranged everything. Did she seem mentally competent to you during your last visit with her?" "Absolutely." Rosa was sharp as a tack until the very end. She had some normal age-related memory lapses, but nothing that would impair her judgment about financial decisions. That's why I was surprised when her new doctor's office called requesting her medical records for a competency evaluation. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, it turned out, ran a small practice that specialized in elder care assessments. Her online reviews were suspiciously sparse, and her credentials seemed legitimate but unremarkable. Most importantly, she had a history of providing favorable competency evaluations in contested inheritance cases. I spent an entire Saturday afternoon at the courthouse researching property records and financial documents. Texas Public Records revealed that Grandma Rosa's house had been quietly listed for sale just 1 week after the will was signed. The listing agent was Carmen Delgado, the same woman who'd witnessed the will signing. Apparently, Carmen wasn't just a helpful neighbor, she was a real estate agent who'd been promised a lucrative commission. The property listing contained details about the house that only someone with extensive access could have known. It mentioned recent electrical updates and new plumbing fixtures that I'd never seen during my visits. Either these improvements had been made without my knowledge, or the listing contained fabricated information designed to inflate the property value. Armed with this evidence, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of immediately hiring a lawyer I couldn't afford, I reached out to Carmen Delgado directly, pretending to be a potential buyer interested in viewing the property. We met on a Wednesday afternoon. Carmen was a nervous, twitchy woman in her mid-50s who seemed uncomfortable discussing the house's history. When I casually mentioned being familiar with the previous owner, her anxiety became even more apparent. "Oh, you knew Mrs. Martinez?" Carmen asked, fidgeting with her car keys. "Such a sweet lady. Very grateful for all the help her granddaughter provided during her final months." "Which granddaughter?" I asked innocently. "She had 2, you know." Carmen's expression shifted to confusion. "Really, Vanessa never mentioned having a sister. She said she was Mrs. Martinez's only family member, which is why the inheritance situation was so straightforward." Bingo. Vanessa had deliberately concealed my existence from everyone involved in the estate planning process. She'd created a fictional narrative where she was Grandma Rosa's sole surviving relative, eliminating any potential complications or questions about the inheritance distribution. "That's strange." I continued, pulling out my phone to show Carmen some family photos. "Here's a picture from last Christmas. That's me with Grandma Rosa and Vanessa together." Carmen stared at the photo like she'd seen a ghost. I don't understand," Vanessa said. "She told me she was an only child." "Carmen, I think you should know that Vanessa lied to you about a lot of things, and those lies might have legal consequences for everyone who participated in this estate transfer." The real estate agent's face went pale. "What kind of legal consequences?" "The kind that could result in fraud charges, especially for people who knowingly participated in deceiving an elderly person about their family situation." I was bluffing, but Carmen didn't know that. She started talking immediately. Vanessa had approached her 6 months earlier with a proposal. Carmen would befriend Grandma Rosa, gain her trust, and eventually witness some important legal documents. In exchange, Carmen would receive the listing contract for the house, and a substantial bonus when it sold. She said it was just family business, helping her grandmother organize her affairs, Carmen insisted. I never thought it was illegal. Vanessa seemed so concerned about her grandmother's well-being. Carmen agreed to provide me with copies of all her communications with Vanessa, including text messages that clearly outlined their arrangement. These messages proved premeditation and conspiracy, transforming what might have been seen as family drama into potential criminal activity. My final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. While cleaning out my own apartment to make room for Grandma's cookbooks, I found an old voicemail on my home phone from 3 months earlier. It was Grandma Rosa calling while I was at work. "Mija, I'm very confused about something," her voice said on the recording. "Vanessa brought a lawyer to the house today. They want me to sign papers, but I don't understand why I need a new will. I thought you should know about this. Call me when you get home." I'd never received this message because my answering machine had been acting up around that time. But the timestamp proved that Grandma Rosa had been concerned about Vanessa's legal maneuvering and had tried to reach out to me for guidance. This voicemail demonstrated that she hadn't willingly participated in changing her will. She'd been pressured and confused by Vanessa's manipulation. With this evidence compiled, I finally felt ready to contact a lawyer. But first, I had one more stop to make. I arranged to meet Vanessa at our parents' house on a Sunday afternoon, claiming I wanted to discuss family matters in a neutral setting. Mom and Dad were visiting my uncle in Austin for the weekend, so we'd have complete privacy for what I knew would be an explosive conversation. Vanessa arrived in her Tesla, wearing a designer outfit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She'd clearly been enjoying her newfound wealth, but I could see the stress underneath her polished exterior. My previous hints about evidence had apparently been keeping her awake at night. "I'm glad you called," she said, as we settled in the living room where we'd spent countless childhood hours. "I think it's time we put this inheritance drama behind us and focus on being sisters again." "I couldn't agree more," I replied, pulling out a thick manila folder. "That's exactly why I wanted to share something with you." I spread the evidence across our parents' coffee table like a prosecutor presenting a case. Bank statements showing Vanessa's luxury spending months before Grandma's death. Screenshots of social media posts documenting her expensive lifestyle. Text messages between her and Carmen Delgado, discussing their fraudulent scheme. The voicemail from Grandma Rosa expressing confusion about the will changes. Vanessa's face went through a remarkable transformation as she absorbed the scope of evidence I'd compiled. Confidence melted into shock, then hardened into defensive anger. "Where did you get all this?" she demanded, her voice rising. "You've been stalking me, going through my private communications. Everything here is either public record or was voluntarily provided by people who realized they'd been manipulated," I said calmly. Carmen was very cooperative once she understood the legal implications of participating in elder fraud. "Elder fraud? Are you insane?" I helped Grandma Rosa organize her affairs. She was grateful for my assistance. I played the voicemail on my phone's speaker. Grandma Rosa's confused, concerned voice filled the room, asking why she needed a new will and expressing her desire to talk with me about Vanessa's lawyer visit. The recording hit Vanessa like a physical blow. She'd clearly never expected our grandmother to reach out to me about her concerns. For several long moments she stared at the phone in stunned silence. "That doesn't prove anything," she finally whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "By itself, no. But combined with everything else," I gestured to the evidence spread across the table. "Carmen's confession about your arrangement. Dr. Hernandez's questionable evaluation practices. The fact that you lied to everyone about having a sister. The timeline showing your expensive purchases began months before Grandma's death. Your falsification of property improvements to inflate the house value." Vanessa's composure finally cracked completely. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. I had debts, Jessica. Serious debts to people who don't accept late payments. I needed that money to survive. So, you decided to steal it from our grandmother I borrowed against my inheritance." I knew I'd eventually get something when she died, so I started accessing my future assets early. It's not theft when it's your own money. The twisted logic of her justification was breathtaking. It wasn't your money, Vanessa. And manipulating an elderly woman to change her will isn't accessing future assets, it's fraud. She stood up abruptly, pacing around the living room like a caged animal. Fine. You want to destroy our family over this, take me to court. Spend years fighting legal battles that will bankrupt both of us. I've got $10 million to fund my defense. How much do you have? Enough, I said quietly. Because I'm not just fighting for money anymore. I'm fighting for justice for Grandma Rosa, who trusted you, and was betrayed by her own granddaughter. Something in my tone made Vanessa stop pacing. She turned to face me with an expression I'd never seen before. Genuine fear mixed with desperate calculation. What do you want? She asked. I want the truth. All of it. I want to know exactly how you manipulated our grandmother, who else was involved, and how long you'd been planning this scheme. Vanessa slumped back into her chair, suddenly looking much older than her 34 years. The weight of maintaining her deception had clearly been enormous, and now that it was crumbling, exhaustion was setting in. It started with gambling, she admitted quietly. I got involved with some high-stakes poker games about 2 years ago. I was winning at first, making good money. But then I started losing, and the people running these games aren't the type you can just walk away from. She explained how her debts had escalated rapidly. When threats became violence, she desperately looked for ways to access quick money. Our grandmother's modest lifestyle had always seemed like a waste to Vanessa. Surely Rosa had savings that could help solve immediate problems. I started visiting more often, looking for opportunities to understand her financial situation. That's when I discovered the real estate investments and the inheritance from Mexico. She was sitting on millions while I was about to get my legs broken by loan sharks. The plan had evolved gradually. First, Vanessa convinced Grandma Rosa to let her help with financial paperwork. Then she introduced the idea of estate planning to protect the family legacy. Each step seemed reasonable and caring on the surface, but was actually designed to give Vanessa more control over our grandmother's assets. I never meant for it to go this far, she said, but we both knew that was a lie. Every aspect of her scheme had been carefully calculated, from isolating potential witnesses to fabricating medical evaluations. As I listened to her confession, I realized that Vanessa wasn't just a greedy opportunist. She was someone who'd become completely disconnected from basic human decency. The sister I'd grown up with was gone, replaced by someone capable of preying on the very person who'd loved her unconditionally. But her confession had also given me exactly what I needed to ensure justice would finally be served. The following Monday morning, I walked into the offices of Rodriguez and Associates, one of San Antonio's most respected elder law firms. Maria Rodriguez, the senior partner, had agreed to take my case on a contingency basis after reviewing the evidence I'd compiled. Her confidence in our chances was reassuring, but what happened next exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. Your sister made a critical error, Maria explained, during our strategy session. By involving multiple conspirators and crossing state lines with some of the financial transfers, she's potentially facing federal charges in addition to state-level fraud accusations. Within 48 hours of filing our legal challenge, the investigation expanded beyond a simple will contest. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division became interested when they discovered Vanessa's scheme involved interstate banking fraud and potential money laundering through her gambling activities. Carmen Delgado, terrified of federal prosecution, immediately agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for immunity. Her detailed testimony revealed that Vanessa had orchestrated similar schemes with 2 other elderly clients, using Carmen's real estate connections to identify vulnerable targets. Dr. Patricia Hernandez's practice came under intense scrutiny when investigators discovered she'd provided favorable competency evaluations in 17 contested inheritance cases over the past 3 years. Her medical license was suspended pending a full investigation, and several families came forward with similar stories of suspicious elder manipulations. The most satisfying moment came when federal agents executed a search warrant on Vanessa's newly purchased downtown condo. They seized financial records, computer equipment, and documentation, proving she'd been planning the inheritance theft for over 18 months. Her text messages revealed communications with loan sharks, gambling operators, and other co-conspirators that painted a picture of someone completely consumed by greed and desperation. Vanessa's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence was too overwhelming. She was formally charged with elder fraud conspiracy, wire fraud, and money laundering. The federal prosecutor's office estimated her potential sentence at 15 to 20 years in prison if convicted on all counts. Meanwhile, the civil court moved quickly to freeze all assets from Grandma Rosa's estate pending resolution of our challenge. Vanessa's luxury lifestyle came to an abrupt halt when her accounts were seized and her Tesla was impounded as evidence. The most emotional moment of this entire ordeal came when I returned to Grandma Rosa's house to collect her personal belongings. Maria Rodriguez had arranged for the property to be released back to the family estate while the criminal investigation continued. As I walked through the rooms where I'd spent so many cherished hours, I found a hidden compartment in Grandma's bedroom closet that investigators had missed. Inside was a handwritten letter addressed to me along with the original pages that had been torn from her cookbooks. The letter, dated just 2 weeks before her death, revealed everything. Me querida Jessica, if you're reading this, then something has happened to prevent me from giving you this letter myself. I want you to know that I never wanted to change my will. Vanessa has been pressuring me for months, bringing lawyers and doctors who say confusing things about my mental state. She tells me I'm forgetting things, but I remember everything clearly, including how much you've sacrificed to care for me. The recipes hidden in these cookbook pages aren't just family traditions, they're the locations of safety deposit boxes where I've been hiding money from Vanessa's schemes. I discovered months ago that she was stealing from my accounts, so I moved most of my assets to places she couldn't find them. The real will is in box 247 at First National Bank. You are my sole beneficiary, Mija. You always have been. Please forgive a foolish old woman for not being strong enough to stop Vanessa's manipulation. I was afraid of losing both my granddaughters, so I tried to appease her while protecting what rightfully belongs to you. Take care of our family legacy, and remember me with love, not sadness. The safety deposit boxes contained not just money but also detailed documentation of Vanessa's theft attempts, recordings of her threatening conversations, and evidence of her gambling debts. Grandma Rosa had been secretly building a case against Vanessa while pretending to go along with her schemes. The real will, properly witnessed and notarized, left everything to me with a small trust fund designated for Vanessa, contingent on her completing addiction treatment and maintaining employment for 5 consecutive years. Even while being manipulated and threatened, our grandmother had tried to provide for both of us while protecting her assets from Vanessa's self-destructive behavior. 6 months later, Vanessa pled guilty to all federal charges in exchange for a reduced sentence of 12 years in prison. The state court voided the fraudulent will and I inherited Grandma Rosa's complete estate. After paying legal fees and taxes, I established a foundation dedicated to protecting elderly people from financial exploitation. Carmen Delgado lost her real estate license and received 5 years of probation. Dr. Patricia Hernandez was convicted of fraud and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Several other victims came forward, and ongoing investigations revealed an entire network of people preying on vulnerable seniors throughout Texas. As for me, I learned that justice isn't always swift, but it can be incredibly thorough when the truth finally emerges. Grandma Rosa's wisdom guided me even after her death, teaching me that family loyalty must be earned through love and respect, not demanded through blood relations. Today, I live in Grandma's house on Flores Street, maintaining her garden and cooking from the family recipes she protected for me. Every Saturday morning, I sit on her front porch with my café con leche, grateful for the lesson that sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones you need to protect yourself against. The $10 million wasn't just an inheritance. It was validation that genuine care and devotion matter more than manipulation and greed. Grandma Rosa knew exactly who deserved her legacy, and in the end, family karma made sure justice was served. Speaking of family karma and justice, I'm curious about your experiences. Have you ever dealt with family betrayal or witnessed someone get their comeuppance after taking advantage of elderly relatives? How do you think families should handle inheritance disputes when greed overrides love? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button if you believe in karma coming full circle. Subscribe for more real-life stories about justice being served, and please share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that truth always finds a way to surface. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and remember, family bonds built on genuine love will always triumph over those founded on manipulation and greed. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right and protecting those who can't protect themselves.